to reap the benefit of your
1, 2.
real personality.
1, 2. I'm a Jew. 3,
That never gets
4. She's a whore. 5, 6.
Starting when
Pick up
you're
sticks.
ready.
I saw him downstairs.
So did I, and I said to him, "We're going up," and he was eating a salmon.
So before we get to, do we have any specific things we want to talk to TJ about in the absence of Frederick?
Whoa, I thought
Rogan.
great thing to talk to TJ.
It was about Rogan? Okay, all right, that's fair enough.
Hi, we're starting. Come when you can. Sorry to
Row, Rogan, gently.
sorry to interrupt your salmon. Noam said, "Get your ass up here right this second."
So, I mean, what's the latest on Rogan other than, I guess, I mean,
Let's wait for TJ to come.
have you been following the story?
Yeah, a little
Let's
bit.
just talk about something else then.
Comes up in my feed.
When are you going to the Bahama Mama Mamas?
17th, Thursday. A week from tomorrow.
Let's start. How come you're not taking your jacket off?
I'm cold.
Why you cold? Let's talk about how come I'm the only one who gets to reap. the
Okay, so next
benefit.
week I'm in Aruba Booba Booba, and then the week after that you're in Bahama Mama Mama, and so will I be. So,
Let's start.
all right, Nicole, hit.
Yeah, you're good to go.
This is live. Why are you giggling? This is live from the table, recorded at the world-famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Rod Dog and on the Laugh Button Podcast Network. Dan Naturman here, along with Noam Dworman, the owner of the world-famous Comedy Cellar. Periel Aschenbrand is with us. She needs no introduction and will get none. Noam Dworman, are we officially post-pandemic? It feels that way. I'm wearing my mask, but mostly just because I don't want other people to be upset that I'm not wearing it. And also when it's cold out, it does provide some protection.
Why would you wear? You had Omicron.
Well, like I said, I suppose one might wear it if there were other variants, but I just, or if you could possibly get it twice. But basically I'm wearing it, as I've said, A, to keep warm, B, to keep people from looking at me funny on the subway. But I feel as though it's over in New York City. I get that's the vibe I'm getting. Even you walk around without a mask, which is a sure sign that things are coming to an end.
Yeah, I think it's over. I don't know. I feel like I felt like it was over once before, and now I think Omicron is over. The positivity rate has fallen by like 98%, and also the group of people who are testing are, I think, made up more by people who think that they might have COVID. So, like before the holidays, everybody was just getting tested because they were going to go to gatherings and stuff like that, going to see grandma. So the rates were like 30%, and it was a lot of people who probably didn't have COVID, didn't suspect they had COVID. Now it's like 2%, and the people getting tested are people who are coughing and stuff, who think they might have COVID for some reason. So it's even kind of less, apples to apples. So I think that what is that face, Periel? You think you got me on something? Go ahead. Let's see. Let's go ahead.
You just said that right before the holidays, everybody was just getting tested, right? Did you just say that?
So I believe so.
I believe I said that.
Okay. And you raked me over the coals when I said I was just getting tested just to get tested. And you were like, you don't get tested unless you think there's something wrong.
No, people.
And I was like, I didn't think there was something wrong. I just got.
I never said people were getting. Hey, TJ. I never said people were getting tested just to get tested. They were getting tested because they were going to gatherings. That's what I said. They're going to
Same difference.
No, it's not the same
Hi,
difference.
TJ.
Hi, TJ.
I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner.
Sit here. It's not the same difference. Point is that we're going to rehash the thing again.
No.
Periel came to our house, spread COVID in the house. She thought she had strep, and she told us she had like.
I didn't think I had strep.
You took a strep test, and I said nobody takes a strep test unless they have. So that's what I said.
I thought I was having symptoms from my flu shot, which I had gotten the
so
day
you took a
before,
strep test,
which came back negative, along with 2 COVID tests that came back.
Well,
negative.
anyway, this is rehashing.
This is so annoying because let me just tell TJ very quickly, and then we get on to things that people are actually interested in hearing. We were having a Christmas dinner, and I have people in my family who are immunocompromised and high risk. We have kids, whatever it is. So we had decided that for the 14 days or 10 days prior to Christmas, we're just going to lay low. We weren't going to see anybody. The kids were going to school with like this kind of serious N95 mask, and because we really wanted to preserve Christmas. We hadn't had Christmas in a number of years, and we wanted to preserve Christmas. So we get an email from Periel saying,
No, not for me. Not for me. It was from Guy.
from her husband, but it's the same thing.
It's not.
Oh, you're going to hide behind that?
Well, I would have never sent that email.
Do you not vet all your husband's emails before you send?
I know, I don't.
So
I
we
should.
get an email from her husband saying, we are sure we don't have COVID. We haven't seen anybody in 2 weeks. And Periel added, I've had 3 tests. They're all negative. We are absolutely sure we have COVID. Can we hang out? And I'm like, and Juanita had sent an email saying, listen, if you have a cold or anything, don't come, because she's like, no, we are sure we don't have COVID. So she came over. So she's in our house. She's like, and she's at our computer. Juanita's like, why? What are you looking up? She goes, oh, it's just a COVID test that I took. And Juanita's like, what? So the end of the story. She had COVID. She's hanging out at our house, hanging around our kids. She had COVID.
So she wanted to murder your family. That was the plan? Is that what it was?
So we had to cancel our Christmas.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, because the way the dates
That
were,
was terrible.
we couldn't be sure we had COVID.
So what were those 3 tests that you took?
First of all, I let you take. I'm gonna let it go. I let you take so many liberties with that story for the
Look,
purpose.
doesn't matter, Noam. You invited her in the house. If you really
No,
wanted to
Juanita
be,
did.
If you wanted to be safe, then you shouldn't have had people.
Well, yeah, if I fucked up. I trusted you. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I took 3 COVID tests. They all came back
No,
negative.
one of them you hadn't gotten. So that's the thing.
no,
There was
no.
one test she hadn't gotten back yet.
But that one,
that one came back the day after she was at our house. I'm like, you had an outstanding COVID test. She goes, I only took it because I thought I had strep.
That's
Like, you
the-
thought you had strep.
No, the only reason I took that one.
Strep is pretty close to COVID, you know?
My strep test came back negative. I took 2
Obviously.
strep tests. They both came back
She had no
negative.
symptoms, but she took 2 strep tests, 3
my
COVID
throat,
tests.
My throat hurt. I got
pregnancy
flu
test.
shot.
Oh,
All right,
she
let's
peed on a
move
stick.
Let's
Well,
move on.
I'm not sure this conversation was interesting the first time we had it. Anyway,
okay,
we
let's
have
go.
with us Tanael Joachim, I believe is how you pronounce your name.
Tanael Joachim, but I'll take that.
Tanael what?
Take that. Tanael Joachim.
Joachim is Joachim?
Well, Joachim is I would say the Spanish / some, I guess, maybe German way to say it, but Joachim is the French way to say it.
Joachim?
Well, in any-
It's way better.
Joachim, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
But it's very hard for Americans.
Joachim.
Well, so he just
Is
said
that right? I say it right?
Joachim, but the M is silent. French is a very wasteful language.
What's the last sound in the word?
Joachim.
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 Tanael Joachim.
Oh, I like the way you said Tanael.
Thank you.
Said it.
well, in
It's
either
very good.
case, she
Voulez-vous
we-
coucher
we-
avec
we-
Joachim?
we call him
I
TJ
did a
here.
bunch of COVID tests before that happened.
TJ comes to us by way of the great nation of Haiti
Yes, sir.
on the island of Hispaniola,
Wow.
which I believe is the only European colony that freed itself
They had a slave revolt.
by revolt.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So it has that Toussaint Louverture, was that his name?
That is right.
Okay. In any case, we
When you're
well
finished showing off, Dan, let's get to the show.
No, it's well earned. He's a
Man went
wealth
to
of
college.
knowledge, Mr.
He's got a
Naturman.
degree in Haitian
all the
studies.
way from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. The great TJ is here, a comedian
alright.
that is a regular.
Now, last time you were here, I was looking forward to introduce you to Coleman Hughes because you were,
Yes,
and he was on
yes.
our show last week. Or
Yeah, last week.
Because I saw you guys, you played music on one of those Mondays.
Oh, you were
I didn't
there?
know he was a musician.
Yeah,
he's
I'm badass.
Really nice
and
with-
did you know that Coleman, before he became what he is, was a nationally known jazz prodigy?
Oh, I had
I
no
didn't know
idea.
that either.
Okay, so he's smart on
Yeah,
everything.
He's an amazing
He's
guy.
a Juilliard dropout.
I know he went to Juilliard. I knew he was a fine musician, but I didn't know that he actually had national attention as like a teenager.
That's very nice.
Because
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. He's quite good. All right, but we're not here to talk about Coleman. I said
Coleman 19.
Coleman 19.
you know.
What about? I want to talk about Joe Rogan.
Okay, well,
Yes,
let's set the
yes.
stage. Joe Rogan, first he got into trouble because he allegedly was inviting on people to his show that
Alleged.
Had
well,
different perspectives.
had bad bad information on. I guess it's not alleged.
Yes,
but in
I
any
mean,
case,
Joe Rogan he's not hiding this. He's kind of a conspiracy theory kind of guy. So whenever there's something that's mainstream, he tends to like try to figure out what's the opposite way of looking at this, and he seeks out those people. He does that a lot.
But now he's in trouble once again because I guess it was who was it? Somebody India Ari.
India Ari. That kind of stuff to me is just.
Well, she came. She. I don't know what she did. She rifled through old episodes. Whatever she did.
Those
And she
clips
found.
have been there forever.
She found clips of him using the N-word that were chopped up, so you just heard him going beep, beep,
Yeah.
beep. You didn't
No
hear-
one would look good if you do that. Like over 12 years of podcasting, like she took every single moment where he said the N-word and then put it together. It's gonna look fucking horrible. That's crazy.
And the one thing he also said, which is, I mean, look, there's no context for his N-word comments, and so we'll discuss that in a bit.
Yes.
But he also said something about going to see the Planet of the Apes.
Yes, that
And-
story was a bad story. I mean, he admitted after telling that story that was a.
So he said he walked
thing.
into the theater and he said it was like I was in Planet of the Apes.
He went to see Planet of the Apes, and he
in a
went to
black
Planet
neighborhood
yeah.
in Philly. It was like, oh, I went there. It was just all black people. It's like I was in Planet of the Apes.
So
Yes.
that's obviously, I mean, that's a
that's-
little bit trickier to defend that.
Yeah, there's no two ways about that. That's shitty. That's racist. He was trying to be funny, but that was a racist thing to say for sure. I mean, comedians like to say offensive things with their friends. Like a podcast is sort of like having a live group chat. You know, if we looked at all of our group chats, we'd be fucked because the shit we say to our
I'm
friends.
so happy you said that because that's exactly what I said. I don't interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I said that. First of all, just before I say that, the one thing that's been clear since the 70s, even when almost anything went, is that you could not compare black people to apes. Howard
Right.
Cosell got fired for that, even though he didn't even do it.
That's like racism 101.
yeah, that was that's always been a third rail. So you know, just to say that a lot of things have changed, but that has been around
Yes.
way before cancel culture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But what I said was, if a comedian had sat down at the table among people who all knew each other, black and white, and made that comment that Rogan made, we would, if we all knew each other's kind of essence and realized he was just making an outrageous joke or an irresistible joke,
yeah.
I think it would have been okay for most people. We would have assumed,
Right.
because you know me and I know you, and you know that I know, and you know and I know that you
There's
know.
a context.
Was there a black
hold
person-
on.
Okay.
To broadcast it is a very vulgar thing to do. Now I understand
Yes.
as much as anybody that when you're in front of the microphone, you forget yourself and whatever it is.
Yes.
So I don't think it means he's a racist,
No, he made a racist joke.
but it's
That doesn't mean
a
he's racist.
it's a racist joke. Yeah, it's a racist
Yeah.
joke. And I mean I wouldn't have made that joke, but
Yeah.
it's interesting but you're ready to forgive him for that.
Oh, I mean, look, if we wouldn't let anyone work if they've said anything racist, nobody would have a job. Because everybody's said something crazy or racist in the privacy of their own home. That's just what it is. So this purge that we're doing where like you cannot ever, if we find out, doesn't matter how long ago you said something that was tasteless or somewhat racist, then you should not deserve to feed your children. That's crazy. There's no reasonable adult that could stand behind that.
I agree with
see
you, but
the wheels turning in your head. Dan, what do you want to say something?
I agree. I do agree. I just would also just add to that I can't imagine anybody making that comment at the table downstairs. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they would.
They probably would.
Was
I've been at the
was a
table. They
black?
probably would.
Was there a black person at the when Rogan made that comment in
No,
studio?
there wasn't. There was Joey Diaz, who's Latino, and there was someone else. I don't remember the name. That was a white guy.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is a comment. I just can't imagine myself making it.
yeah, me too.
But
Most people wouldn't. It's a
You know,
racist comment.
Yeah.
But
sure.
at the same time, I don't want to see him, drawn and quartered for it.
The thing is, okay,
As
now
long as-
let's ask the question, right? Because this is what people are trying to do. Okay, because of this comment, let's say Spotify drops Joe Rogan. How does that help black people? What does that do for us? Because he said a racist joke, now he's out of a job.
Can I rewind just one thing about the racist thing? So, the word racist, it's hard for me to, I always have trouble with this, to use the word racist as opposed to racial or I don't know what other words are, outside the context of a scenario that involves actual hate.
Yeah.
I never feels right saying that's a racist.
It definitely has been weaponized. That's
Yeah.
the word.
So, like for instance, this is not an analogy to racism, but just to give you an example. So when my father, Nick DiPaolo, the comedian.
Yeah, yeah.
So when my father was sick, and we knew he was about to die from cancer, I went to the comedian table, and I said, "Yeah, it doesn't look like he has much longer to live." And DiPaolo says, "Who gets the Lexus?" Like, 'cause my father drove a Lexus. Like, who was going to inherit the Lexus? Like, you'd think this was the most fucking tasteless joke. Like, to his son, he makes this joke,
Yes.
Like, and I could not believe he said it. Because, like, what a ballsy thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But...
Did you laugh?
I did laugh.
Okay.
But
Did you think it was funny?
Well, if you laughed,
I thought
clearly you thought it was
no, to be
funny.
honest, I thought he took a liberty. I wasn't like thrilled, like go Nick, like, but I didn't hold it against him even for a minute because I knew he loved I knew there was nothing about it.
That's right.
Other than just going for the outrageous laugh.
Yes.
Like, what shouldn't I say? Let me say that because that's how you get a laugh
Yes.
sometimes,
Yes.
And that's what I think Rogan was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He was taking the fact that people, unfortunately, do make these kind of comparisons a lot, and people do associate these things, and he was just like, leaning into it,
And he's very aware of it. In the same clip where he said, it's like I was in Planet of the Apes, like, I think 20 seconds later, he's like, oh, that was a racist thing to say. He said that himself.
Yeah.
So it's not that he's unaware of it. He knows it, and those clips have been out there for a while.
Well,
What year was this? I'm sorry, dude.
I don't know, maybe 2013, 2014.
I can't read Joe Rogan's mind, and so I have to fall back on his resume, if you will, in terms of what things he's done, and if there's nothing that indicates racist intent, then I have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
But he shouldn't have said.
But it was an awful comment. As far as the N-word is concerned, I didn't hear the context. And nowadays, there is an outright ban on the use of the N-word for white people, but it wasn't always that way.
No, it wasn't.
No. There's saying a word and there's referring to a word.
But nowadays, you can't do either without getting into trouble, whereas
Which I find pretty stupid.
Whereas back in the day, you could say the N-word in a certain way. You could say it like you could quote somebody else that was saying it.
Right.
You could comment on it.
So
and to assume that just referring to that word is an affront to all black people, I think is it's infantilizing. Because we're grown enough to know the distinction between somebody calling you a nigger and somebody saying the word nigger. There's a huge difference.
Do you think, TJ, as a Haitian, you're not what we call it an American
ADOS.
an ADOS? Do you feel that you have a different perspective on the N-word, or do you get that sense?
Yes, but I don't think it's necessarily because I'm Haitian. Because I know black Americans who also feel that way. Obviously, not the majority of them feel that way, but maybe that plays a part. But I think it's just the way you look at things very objectively, but also in terms of what are we trying to achieve?
Can I just ask you, in Haiti, is that a word that is used a lot amongst the black community there, as it is
Not really.
here?
Not really, just because, first of all, the language is different. So we have a version of it, but it doesn't carry the history that it has in America, because there's no white people in Haiti, per se. There's like mulattoes and people that are light skinned.
You're not supposed to say mulatto either, but we're gonna let you.
There you go.
Yeah, we're gonna let you go on that one.
So there's a lot of mixed race people out there, like maybe 3% of the population, but it's not something we worry about. No.
So
Hi, Fred. Come sit down.
First of all, I think it goes without saying that that's a horrible thing to say, and nobody should say that.
So we're joined by Fred Kaplan, columnist for Slate magazine.
Well, were you talking about?
Foreign affairs expert, and this is TJ, and he's telling us his take on the Rogan thing.
Oh, okay.
And he's pretty forgiving of Rogan, and now he's saying he's talking about a white person using the N-word, which just to refer to the word, which I think you said was stupid and infantilizing.
Yes, because referring to a word, everybody knows what that is, as opposed to calling someone a word. And also, it's very strange I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know which words that has been done with before. The notion that if a word disappears from the language, it disappears. right?
Yeah. But you
They're
have
all words that we don't use anymore because we just give up on them. But it's going to be very tricky when you have a word where one group of people can say it and then no other group can say. Well, I don't know if it's no other group because Dominicans say the N-word all the time. Asian kids who hang out with black kids say it all the time. So it's a very tricky thing where it's like everyone can say it, but one group, I don't know. It's it's not very clear what we're doing with it. I don't know what's happening.
So I think you said something so interesting,
Mm-hmm.
which
She's never said that to me, by the way, but go ahead.
I'm sorry, no.
this idea that these episodes have been out there for so many years and
No one cared.
Right. I mean, it's like, what is the... First of all, I want to start by saying I think no white person should say that.
Yeah.
Why? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you say that? No one can
Because-
refer to it?
No, I don't know if nobody can refer to it, but I don't...
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm asking you why.
Because I think that if there's something that the majority of a historically oppressed group of people find offensive, like white people should just accept that and like let go of like, what do you have invested in like this one word that is hurtful and offensive and has such a horribly racist history? It's
Right.
like, don't fucking say it. It's not that big of a deal. Give it up. That having been said, suddenly everybody's so horrified that Joe Rogan has said this word for like X number of years.
Yes.
It feels manipulative, right?
Yes.
Like everybody suddenly
Of course it
cares
is.
about black people in this way that they didn't for what? How many years are we going back these episodes?
2013. Like, I mean, it feels like a hit job. That's really what it feels like because Rogan has gotten a little bit too big, and I
Right.
think mainstream media is somewhat worried about that, about
Yeah.
his influence and who is influencing specifically, and they want to take him down.
Yeah, they
But
don't
no,
like
look,
the
Let
vaccine
Fred,
stuff.
and then I want to say something too. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, this latest episode started for a different reason. It was Neil Young objected to his
The COVID stuff.
the anti-vax stuff, and
Right.
he said, "I'm not going to do this anymore." And then you can focus on all kinds of other. Then he's attracted attention all of a sudden, and this other stuff. I'm against podcasts just because they don't pay musicians anything. That's my problem with podcasts.
Stream, they pay very little.
Oh, they pay like 1/10 of a cent for every.
Oh, you mean
So-
Spotify? That's what
Spotify,
you mean. Okay.
Can I give you a
what I
few
meant.
things on that? So just in no particular order. First of all, when I can remember a time when I'd never heard the phrase the N-word.
Yeah.
So there was a time when
You had to say the
People-
word.
you just said the word.
when Dick Cavett or David Susskind or Bill Buckley or whoever was discussing, or even Joe Biden, there's clips of Joe Biden using the
Of
word.
course.
Wait, would Bill Buckley and Dick Cavett use the word? I don't remember anything. like
Absolutely.
Oh, Dick Cavett definitely used
Yeah.
the word in interviews. I think
In
with
interviews,
Richard Pryor.
discussing.
Yeah.
that. Really?
With someone,
Yeah.
so I can remember a time when if we had an
Back in
incident,
1971,
yeah,
maybe?
in the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Before but even much later when we had an incident where somebody called one of our employees the N-word one time in the 80s or maybe in the 90s, I remember it being discussed and we said the word.
Right.
Nobody was.
See, you're discussing the fact that somebody called your employee that word.
Yeah. So fast forward to now. I mean, I don't say it anymore. Even when I was reading To Kill a Mockingbird to my kids in the privacy of our own home, I didn't say it I couldn't say it because it's taken on a new thing. Like, in the Arab world, if you hold a shoe next to somebody's face, this is the ultimate offense. It's like,
Yes.
like we look at
It's shame.
why are you so ashamed? But there's a visceral association that it's taken on beyond the rational aspect of it. It's just like if you hear somebody say that word now, it's just impossible to take. We've overlaid that on it, and so if you
Yeah.
say it now, it's like you're fighting for your right to say it. It's like, and that's a little gross, like.
Yes.
So.
But I think
the
there's some.
stakes to you are very low. You're right to say that. The stakes to somebody else listening to it might be very high. Yeah, I'm with you that, okay, I'm not going to make a big. If somebody's going to get completely bent out of shape about it, it's not really very important to me, and therefore, okay, I won't.
But
say
it's not quite that simple because first of all, okay, I've asked a bunch of black people that I know how they all feel. Every single one has said what you said.
Right.
Comedians and non-comedians alike saying, I never really got that, why you can't refer to the word.
Right.
Wait, this includes non-comedian? 'Cause I can
Non-comedian.
imagine comedians wouldn't give a shit.
Not only non-comedians, but people I know who grew up in the Deep South, who were visceral. As a matter of fact, people who were alive during Jim Crow never felt that you couldn't refer to the word. It's a new thing. But the next thing is, but also we all kind of agree you shouldn't say it. No white person should say it. Now the question is, let's say somebody does say it in an obviously innocent context. Do we think, after having said we don't think they should say it, do we think, well, then they should get fired? That's an additional craziness. Like, you know what, you shouldn't have said that. You said a vulgar thing. No, you have to get fired. You can't work. I'm sorry. No, I don't agree.
I do remember, and we talked about this.
Yeah.
Richard Pryor, who used to use that word like every sentence, right?
Yes.
Then he went to Africa.
Right.
And he saw black professionals. You know, people who, you know, there weren't that many back then in America, you know, airline pilots, you know, all kind. And he came back and he said, I'm never using that word again.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that suggests that there is something at least implicitly derogatory about the word.
Well, he said, because when I went to Africa, I didn't see any N-words.
Right. He's like, I don't see any. I just see a bunch of black people living their
so
lives.
I'm not going to use that word anymore.
Joe
But every,
Frazier
other but every other comedian still does.
Doesn't he saying Joe Frazier owned the bank? Was that the bit where he goes, everybody look like something? Joe Frazier manages the bank.
He also told his most he'd already milked it from all his work. They don't shoot cars. They shoot. That's his most famous joke,
bit.
right?
Yeah.
But okay, the assumptions that people have that, like, about a black person hearing that word is also interesting to me, because I remember when I was an open mic, it must have been 2012, 2013. And, I was at an open mic, and comedians like to be edgy. They tried stuff, and there was a white comedian on stage, and he was trying to do a joke, and he said the word nigger. He didn't say the N-word, he said nigger. And then this other white comedian came to me, and he was like, are you going to fight him? And I was like, your assumption that I'm going to fight him is actually more racist to me than him saying nigger on stage. Because what makes you think, what am I, some appointed guardian of the N-word? What are you talking about? That you would think that, oh, my first instinct is to use violence because this guy said something that you assume automatically hurts my feeling.
Because you people are
And
violent. Is that?
that's what you people do. Yeah.
It's insane that's what he thought immediately. And I guess there's still some of that thing where people think, well, you know, a black person it doesn't matter the context. If they hear that word, then they're just going to lose their shit.
I sent a comedian, I guess I'm not going to say his name, but I sent a comedian, a very respected comedian, this clip of George Carlin using the word. Do you know the clip?
Of course. I'm a student of George
And
Carlin.
I said to him, what do you think about that? Are you offended by this? He says, that's the reason he's one of the top 3 comics of all time.
Yeah,
Like he
of
was like
course.
totally like, you know.
But he would never,
100%.
Carlin wouldn't do it today.
No, but it does tell you how
he
the
might.
I don't think so.
Louis was doing
Well,
as far as like
he
8,
would
10
fight
years
for his
ago.
right to say it, because he would make the point. Listen, this is ridiculous. Intention is what matters.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I mean, this started. Lenny Bruce would do that kind of thing too. You know.
There's something about the DNA of a comedian, which is if you tell us we can't do something, that's what we exactly want to do. That's what we want to do.
Well, also, what do you think of this? Like George Carlin, he can say this. Let's say some guy who comes on the stage, first time, he's trying out. Could he say it?
Listen,
There's no context. We all know who George Carlin is, where he's coming from. And now
No, of
here
course-
comes
of
Joe
course- of
Schmo.
course
First
not.
time. at Comedy Cellar.
honestly,
Of
the
course not.
only thing that bothers me is to see people who not only didn't have bad intention, but some of them were actually engaged in conversations expressing their outrage at racism. To see someone in a conversation expressing his outrage at racism, discussing that horrible people said this word, and he says the word out loud, losing their jobs, is so offensive to me. I could see why somebody with courage would want to fight against that, because it's wrong. It's deeply
Absolutely.
wrong. It's deeply wrong.
I'm with
And cowards, all of us, we let it go. But it's really wrong. It's really wrong. So that's nothing to say that I think anybody should be using the N-word. But that kind of thing is really angering, and it's disgusting, and that's what we become. So that's why
Speaking of the N-word,
yeah.
are we now going to talk about Ukraine?
Yes.
Well, TJ's.
And you, by the way, you
Yeah,
agree
I'm
with what
going
I just said?
Yes, I agree.
I mean, the idea that somebody is fully on board and expressing
what-
their outrage at racism could end up losing their job because they put it the wrong way.
Yes.
This is horrible.
Yes.
But what's an example of that happening?
It happened a number of times. It happened to the head of one of the heads of Netflix.
Yes,
It happened to
somebody from
McNeil at
Netflix
the
happened.
Times. There's a number of occasions where this has happened.
It's kind of crazy to me how
It happened
that
to
word has
Pesca.
become the focus of racism. Like it's the symbol of racism when really
You could say something much worse without using the N word.
oh
Nobody would
my
do anything.
God, you
That's
could
right.
do and say much worse than like, and the N word is maybe 2% of racism that happens to black people. It has nothing to do with the real shit that we have to deal with.
It really is interesting when you think about like how suddenly now you guys have to be in charge of taking Joe Rogan down because we've made this compilation.
Yeah.
Do you guys know the comedian Chris Allen?
I know Chris Allen.
Yeah.
A black dude from
Yeah,
DC.
yeah. He
It's the least black name I've ever heard.
he's great. He's really great, and he was in the military.
Yes,
and
good
he's
dude.
Yeah,
Very
great
funny
guy. Very funny. He made a point today about on his Instagram, and he was saying, as a black guy, we don't give a shit about Joe Rogan. Like, you guys deal with this yourselves. Why are you like giving us this thing that now it's like our responsibility to like fucking take down Joe Rogan?
It's just using him as a pawn. Well, they're using black people as a pawn in a game of we want to take Joe Rogan down, and we've used all the stuff, and it still hasn't been taken down. So now the ultimate thing is
Right.
white person using the N-word. So black people now, you take him down. Please help us. That's the move.
And by the way, you know, I wrote Fred on there, but on COVID, he has been putting on guests saying not everything these
Things
guests
that
say
aren't
is
right.
wrong.
Yes.
So, for instance, he debated Sanjay Gupta,
Mhm.
and he wiped the floor with Sanjay Gupta on the risk analysis of giving the vaccine to kids.
Yeah.
I mean, Sanjay Gupta went out with his, just crying.
Yeah,
And
but
he's a medical
not-
doctor.
Well, but he's not that kind of a medical doctor. It's like my dentist is a medical
Well, then he
doctor.
shouldn't.
He's-
Then he shouldn't be on
should-
CNN
you're right.
discussing COVID. But
You're
he
right.
is. Yeah.
You're right.
But Malone is a huckster, and
And he gave him a
What do you
few
mean by a
hours,
huckster?
right?
What's a
he gives everybody a few
He
hours.
just makes shit up.
Oh.
And he always has a reason that anytime you're presented with evidence, it was like, oh, well, they have a deal. The hospitals make money off this.
And then Rogan would say, "Oh,
Right.
Is
Wow.
why do they give us so much in Israel? Israel has a deal with Pfizer.
Yeah.
And, but the guy has real credentials, so I could even give Rogan a pass for not in real time knowing that the guy was full of shit. But
So he's an accredited conspiracy theorist. He's that kind
yeah,
of guy.
yeah."
I mean, I did some
That guy
research, and I
was,
didn't
yeah.
send you the email, but I sent an email to friends right afterwards. I did a little research into what this guy was saying, and it just all fell apart. However, Rogan certainly knew that the week or two after that, there were a lot of very, very smart doctors doing videos on YouTube, just taking apart Malone
Yes.
point by
Yes.
point. And if he was actually the kind of guy, like I would be, you guys know me, who was really about making sure that all the legitimate sides were heard, Rogan would have
Bring
immediately
someone
had
else
one of these
on.
other doctors.
Did
Hey,
he?
I saw that email.
Did
No,
he?
he didn't. I saw you had that email. I saw you had that video on YouTube. You really took this guy to task. Why don't you come on my show
And we
and
can
say, or
talk
maybe
about
have them
it.
both on, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if he says he's going to try to do better in the future, good. But between
And-
Rogan, who is very difficult to hate, and Tucker Carlson, who is much easier to hate, a lot of people, I think, got sick because of these,
Yeah, I
because
think
of
so.
the information they gave out.
I think so.
free
absolutely.
country or not,
I
Yeah.
think on the one hand, you have a responsibility when you have a huge platform.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean, people are like, if you want to be an idiot and take medical advice from Joe Rogan,
Not
like,
from Joe Rogan, it's from a doctor he had on who was
Okay.
one of the actual, even the
I know-
one of the inventors of
I know who
mRNA
he is.
technology.
I know who he is, but like,
I also don't think you should take medical advice from a doctor on a podcast.
Exactly.
Like if a doctor's on TV, I don't trust
He's
him. If
too
you're on
busy. He's not.
television,
He
you're
should
not
be
a
too
doctor.
busy to do that.
it's like
Yeah.
seriously, like if you want to fucking listen to Dr. Malone on Joe Rogan's podcast,
If I were the
you're an
secret-
idiot.
If I were in the State Department, I wouldn't be coming on this show. Now I'm too fucking busy.
Well, whether you're an idiot or not, it's still unfortunate
Yeah.
if you die because you're an idiot.
Okay, but there is one other thing I would say, and then we go to Ukraine.
Mhm.
It's not quite fair to judge us in a vacuum because there have been a few other issues where the Malones of the world actually turned out to be 100% correct.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
They weren't allowed to post. They weren't allowed to. And all of a
There's
sudden,
a reason they
son of a
exist.
bitch, he was right.
Yeah.
So Rogan has every good reason
the
to put the
theory
guy on.
about COVID sneaking out of a lab. A lot of people.
That's
were
right.
just-
And Rogan said that actually. He said some of the things that I said that were banned from social media, I was not allowed
100%
to
true.
say them, came out a few months later
How
and
about-
just accepted as fact.
Fred will tell you, I was freaking out when they were telling us we shouldn't wear masks. Remember? And I did my own research. I said, Fred,
Yeah.
did you see all this? Of course we should be wearing masks.
Yeah, no, they well, the reason for that supposedly was that there weren't very many masks and doctors needed them. Well, it would have been better to say, okay, and therefore we're making 1 million of these masks next month, and wear them when they come out, and in the meantime,
Wrap
cover
a
yourself
sock
up.
around your face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which we now know isn't terribly useful, but we didn't know that for quite a long time.
And it continues till today. We were talking about that this mask mandate, which I'm all for keeping people safe, but when 60 or 70% of people wearing masks are wearing cloth masks, and we know that cloth masks don't work, why we have let's stop the charade already.
Yeah.
Either have a mask mandate and make everybody wear
Well,
a mask
they-
that works, or let people, I'll wear this, it protects me just like it protects doctors in the hospital. They deal with people maskless with COVID all the time. And you can wear what you want, right?
Are you excited that it's over?
COVID's over?
No,
COVID's over.
The mask mandate.
No, to be honest, there's part of me that likes the fact that my kids wear masks in school.
Well, it's not over in schools yet.
Yeah, well, it's going to expire next week, just like this
It
one.
is.
I thought they were making an exemption for schools.
I just heard on the radio on coming over here, the governor actually kind of spun this. These mandates have expiration dates. She chose not to renew it.
Yeah,
Right.
And the mask mandate.
I guess
But-
now it's no longer a mandate, so it's not mandatory. But if you want it for your
yes,
kids, you
I
still
think
have the
most
option.
stores in my neighborhood are still going to
you could
be
still wear it.
requiring masks. I think.
Yeah.
But I also am aware that I'm probably not being rational about this. There's a lot of PTSD associated
Yeah.
with COVID. As I've said many times on this show, if today were the first day of COVID and exactly the risks that we all face today were the initial risks of COVID when it first, we wouldn't do anything.
Right.
We would do zero.
Well,
We-
you mean because of Omicron, were the dominant?
I mean, if the status quo today were the
Yeah.
initial
Oh, I
risk,
see.
what would we do? We'd say, well, it's less than the Hong Kong flu was when I was like be careful. There's a new thing going around. It's kind of
I don't
dangerous.
know about that because
What would we
we're
do?
still killing. A lot of people are like, what, a few thousand people are still dying every day, and it's mainly the unvaccinated.
Right, but for
Yes.
people who I'm saying our risk, who we are vaccinated,
Well, but so in other words, you would say, go get vaccinated and then have a good time. Is that what you would say?
do what you want. You want to get sick, get
But
sick.
you would
know?
require a vaccine.
I would not require a vaccine if people don't want to get vaccinated.
Well,
Okay, well then stay out of the hospital.
Anyway,
You can't. I think that
It's my time to say farewell. So I think
Okay.
that's a good
good talking to you.
segue into Ukraine.
I assume,
Right.
TJ, you're saying farewell because
I gotta go do
you
a
do
set.
performing, not
Go
just
do a
because
set.
you've had enough.
No. I would love to stay.
And that'd be
talk more
funny
about
if,
Ukraine.
if
Be like, yeah, fuck
You
you
it.
don't want to hear
Yeah,
about
I-
Ukraine.
He has a spot.
he has a spot.
I have
No.
to go tell jokes.
What's going to happen if you're late?
But tell me what happened with Ukraine. then.
Probably somebody could complain to you and you'll fire him.
All right, take it easy, TJ.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank
This was fun.
you.
Come
Wait,
hang-
where can we find you? Where can everybody
At
find you?
TJ Stand Up on Instagram and Twitter. Twitter's, oh God, I hate that one. But at TJ Stand Up on Instagram. Please use that. Twitter is a cesspool.
Are you in town on Monday?
Yes.
Come hang out on Monday night.
All right, I'll come through.
Okay.
And
You
your
guys Monday.
special.
Amazon Prime. It's called January 3rd.
Ah,
Look at
okay.
Periel here being a master marketer. All right, guys, I'll see you later.
Thanks
Take
for
it easy.
coming.
Nice to see
Fred Kaplan. We invited him specifically to talk about the Ukraine, so let's get it on.
So Fred, why don't you just take it? Tell the audience. We don't have the smartest audience sometimes, so I'm kidding.
Ukraine. Let's
It's
bring
not a
it on back.
political.
Is it
audience.
now Ukraine and not the Ukraine?
It's been Ukraine, not the Ukraine, for quite a long time.
How long has that been going on?
Oh, a long time.
Since the end of the Soviet Union?
I think so. Yeah, they've dropped. They also, you notice they've respelled Kyiv.
Yeah, with a Y now.
Kyiv. Well, so listen, people. When I was a Moscow correspondent in the '90s, and when I got back, people said, "So how do they pronounce it? Is it Moscow or is it Moscow?" And I said, "Well, actually, it's Moskva." Just like Germany is Deutschland, and you know, a lot of.
And I think China is Changku.
Oh,
and-
very
and-
good.
Changku.
And Peking is apparently Beijing.
Well, that, we've known that for a
Well,
while.
I didn't realize for a while. There was
Well,
a time where I
see,
thought there were
that's
two
how-
different cities.
But see, that was always how the Chinese pronounced it.
I get it.
So, yeah.
And isn't there one of the,
And Mumbai with Bombay.
Mumbai,
when
yeah,
we
yeah.
were
That was
kids.
Bombay. We went through a great
now how
dictionary.
is Bombay pronounced Mumbai, or is that actually a different
Probably.
word altogether?
You're out of my geographic.
No,
depth at this
Bombay is
point.
pronounced Mumbai.
Yeah.
How can a Bombay, like, I can understand how Beijing and Peking, I can see how that is similar.
You don't see how Bombay and Mumbai are
No, because one starts with an M and one starts with
No,
a
but if
B.
you're some imperialist going there and you hear one of the swarthy people talking, then you hear whatever you want to hear
swarthy people.
from the
Wow.
imperialist point of view.
Yes,
Wow.
careful. Okay, so
I'm just referring to it. I'm not. Yeah.
so give us a.
But why don't we call Germany Deutschland?
I don't know. It's a good
you
question.
know, it's-
No idea.
yeah, okay.
I don't know where Germany came
Because the
from.
Germanic people are from
yes,
Germany.
right. But they call it Deutschland, and
I'm
it's
kidding.
not a big tongue twister.
Yeah, it's not that foreign to our ears to say Deutschland.
I don't know.
All right, so give us a primer on Ukraine, and then I have some questions for you. Go ahead.
Why don't you have the initial question first? That might be a better way.
What's
to start
going on
it.
in Ukraine?
Well, look. Let's.
Okay, there's 100 and something thousand
Yeah,
troops on the Ukraine
something like
border.
that, yeah.
What do you think he's up to, and do you think he has Putin? I mean, do you think he has real provocations that we're not understanding from his point of view, or do you think he
Yeah.
has,
By the way, this segment is called Your Darn Putin.
or is he just doing something opportunistically
Well,
with a pretext?
Okay. Now, when is this going to air? This isn't live. Right?
Tomorrow. It's not
Tomorrow.
live. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I was going to say if it's like a week from now, and if I say I think he's not going to invade, and then he invades, you could take the not out of.
Oh,
you
no
could
problem.
edit it out. Yeah.
We got you.
Yeah. So, but I don't think he's going to invade, actually. I think that this has been a horrible miscalculation on his part. I think he thought that he would put all this pressure on. The NATO allies would crumble. They wouldn't want to stand up to him because Germany depends too much on natural gas and oil, and Biden is messed up this and that, and NATO is in disarray. And instead, he forgot that actually NATO is like Biden's, backyard. He knows this stuff, and the people who work for him know it too. And they've done a very good job of kind of keeping everybody together. And now, like everybody in the alliance except Germany is shipping arms to Ukraine. And, Finland and Sweden are talking about maybe we should join NATO now. I mean, Putin's entire strategy from foreign policy is to strengthen Russia by weakening those who might limit or contain Russia. The idea is to exploit the fissures within the European Union and drive a hard wedge between the U.S. and our transatlantic allies. And under our last president, as Biden likes to say, he had a field day. I mean, he should have done what he's doing now. Then we wouldn't have done anything. But at the same time, you do have to look at this from Putin's point of view. And what I'm about to say in no way is meant to justify, support, or excuse what he's doing. But you have to look at it in this way. So Putin, he grows up within the KGB. He has said one time that the crack up of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. He is nostalgic for the great Russian Empire. He's in East Germany with the KGB when the wall comes down. He's helping them burn documents. He's Yeltsin's prime minister when we were putting forth the final steps of the enlargement of NATO. We were able to do this because for many years, including the years I was there, Russia was flat on its back. They would say, okay, we want a Czech Republic and Poland and Romania want to join NATO. I'll tell you what, here's $15 billion. Don't put up too much of a fuss over it. Or, now the Baltics want to join NATO. We'll let you in the G7. Don't make a big fuss about it. And they were so supine.
What's the G7 for people?
It's a group of 7 industrial nations, the great democracy. We kicked them out after they annexed Crimea, but they became the G8 for a while. Now it's back to the G7. In other words, we kind of bribed them into accepting this. And now Putin's in a position, Russian economy, it's not great, but oil prices are high, so it's doing okay. He's brought back the military to a pretty decent military. And so he's saying, okay, I've had enough with this humiliation. And now, think like 2014, what happened when he annexed Crimea and took a slice out of eastern Ukraine? What had happened that year was that Ukraine got rid of a pro-Russia president. They started making very strong moves to join the European Union. Ukraine is like, I mean, to Putin's mind, he has said this. He said Ukraine isn't a real country. He regards it as part of Russia. For centuries, it kind of was. It's the buffer state between Russia and encroachments from the West. It was the breadbasket of Russia for many years, the cultural ties, the political, economic ties. And so here, they're trying to join the European Union, show everybody else in my little circle that there's an alternative way to organize yourself politically, and now maybe joining NATO. You know, it's to him, it's an existential threat. I don't think he's making it up. I think he's quite genuine about that. And so he says, look, basically masses troops on the border, and he thinks that we'll cave, and we haven't caved. And now he's kind of in a spot because, quite honestly, look, if he wanted to invade Ukraine, take over Kyiv, throughout he could do that. But then what? When the Soviet Union invaded and occupied Czechoslovakia in 1968, they did it with 250,000 troops, 5 tank divisions, and they had in Czechoslovakia a whole Communist Party regiment that was very pro-Moscow. The army didn't like what was going on in the reform tendencies, and it still took 250,000 people. 100,000 people to occupy Ukraine, which is 3 times as large, when you've got a Ukrainian army that is feeling its Ukrainian nationalism, when you have these civilian resistance forces going up, when you have even in a city in eastern Ukraine like Kharkiv, which used to be a pro-Russia standout, there are now marches in favor of Ukrainian nationalism, tens of thousands of people in the streets. He's going to get stuck there. It'll make the resistance in Afghanistan look like nothing.
So when you say he feels it's an existential threat, what do you mean by that term, existential threat?
He views Ukraine as part of Russia, and the idea of making Ukraine part of NATO would be like, and what is the purpose of NATO? Well, for a while, everybody was saying after the Cold War, what is the purpose of NATO? Now the purpose of NATO, that's the irony of this. He has revitalized NATO. He has realigned it to its original purpose as an alliance that provides security in the face of
Russia,
possible Russian encroachments, right?
So
he's brought that back.
But does he think existential would mean that Russia or he, it's not the same thing, cease to exist? Does he think that the West? This was always hard to process, like as a little kid during the nuclear era. Like, do they really think that we would go and do they really believe that we would look to try to take over Russia in some way?
We did invade Russia at the end of World War I.
But that was in the context of World War I.
No, but nonetheless, no. The communist government had taken over. It was a brief and futile and idiotic attempt to overthrow the government. No, they think about this all the time. I mean, it does seem paranoid, but one reason why, even in the enlargement of NATO, as it was called, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Romania, and 30 countries now. 5 presidents always stopped short of Ukraine for several reasons. First, there are qualifications you have to fill. You have to have some level of democratization, no corruption, civilian control of the military, the ability to integrate within the NATO military command.
Turkey meets those requirements?
It did for a while. Once you're in NATO, you can't get kicked out. You can get kicked out of the EU.
Kind of like Harvard, huh?
That takes a lot. But Ukraine, and also the main reason why we never added on Ukraine was this would just be a little too provocative for Russia. We really shouldn't do this. And even now, Biden and many others have said, look, we're not going to send troops to Ukraine. And Ukraine, they're not going to become members of NATO for quite a while, if ever. But we don't think that you have the right to tell us what countries can and cannot join. I mean, it's very abstract. And I think what should happen at the end of all this, and I don't know whether it will, but there must be a way. And Putin, I think at this point, Putin is looking for a face-saving way out. And the question is, can we do this without sacrificing principles? There must be a way to have a big assembly where we take into account Russia's legitimate security concerns. And there are some legitimate. For example, they think that the missile defense systems that we've put in Poland, Romania, that Tomahawk cruise missiles can be fitted into these launchers. So I think we should say, okay, look, come on over, inspect the hell out of us. We'll set up a little office for you guys. You can go out and look at any time, see what's going on. I think, things like transparency and military exercises. I mean, this used to go on quite a lot. But come join us. Watch what we're doing.
To climb down off this ledge, doesn't he have to have some way he can declare victory in some way? Well,
if not victory, something where he hasn't given in. I mean, for example, I think Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to me, he was
a comedian, by the way, right?
He is.
Yeah.
He played.
He's a Jew as well.
He played a president
Isn't he?
in a sitcom.
Yeah.
And then he becomes the president. But
He's a Jewish guy, isn't he?
yeah, he is.
That is so insane.
Yeah. It'd be like if Al Franken became president of the United States.
Or
Ronald Reagan.
Well, there you go. But to me, he keeps saying, I want to join NATO. I think he has to be shut up. I mean, to put it bluntly, we have to give him something to say, Volodya, stop talking about NATO for the next 10 years. And then my idea, I think somebody should do it. There should be some document that's written up completely aside from this, like an estimate of when Ukraine might be eligible to join NATO, which basically concludes between a quarter century and never. And then this has kind of slipped to, Sergei Lavrov or some, here, take a look at this. This has nothing to do with what's going on now, but here, this gives you an idea of what the actual chances of this are.
May I just say that this entire thing just sounds like a huge ego trip?
Well,
like this,
there's a lot of personality.
Male fucking crazy ego that, that's why this country has to.
Well, let's be careful on the male, because Mrs. Thatcher and a certain small island off the coast of Argentina were.
Las Malvinas.
It's okay to be sexist or racist as long as you gore the correct ox. That's been my theory.
Oh,
go ahead.
I don't really think you can be sexist against
men. I know.
But
white men,
but there is
sorry.
a
Right,
lot-
but if a man says something about the nature of a woman, that can't be true.
Well, we are the oppressed.
Only men have
we are the
natures,
oppressed
women don't.
group. No. This is such a specific thing. Like this entire.
I don't disagree
Right, but
with
you're
you.
right.
Oh, okay.
But I would.
Wait, did you hear what Fred said?
What?
He said you're right.
I said there's a lot of personality in these politics.
It's crazy.
A lot of egotism. I mean, the whole idea of a face-saving
It's nuts.
way out. But there's a parallel to this, like during the
Sure.
Cuban Missile Crisis.
Wait, and the other, just one more question. How did this comedian become president?
He was
of
very
Ukraine?
popular.
He's
His show
elected.
was popular. Also, but he ran on an anti-corruption ticket.
Okay.
And Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And
He's got a great act.
yeah, and so he was elected to many people's surprise.
Why can't a comedian be going into politics?
I mean, he can. It just doesn't
No,
necessarily.
it's unusual.
Yeah, it doesn't.
The
necessarily-
precedents are limited.
Well, but I mean, they haven't been comedians for that long. But anyway,
Yeah, but
You are
actors-
from Kiev.
we used to have all sorts of backgrounds among American presidents, farmers, businessmen, whatever
Yes,
it is,
that's
and
right.
we didn't. It was not to our detriment to have people with very
There were even some members of the Supreme Court who weren't lawyers.
who were not lawyers. That's right.
That's
right.
interesting.
Yeah. So go ahead. Before Periel interrupted you, women tend to do that. Go ahead.
He had a great bit about Kremenchug.
About what?
Kremenchug.
What's that?
Isn't that a city in the Ukraine? Fred, help me out here.
Not
That's my grandmother was from, and I think it was the Ukraine, but it might have been
a very small.
it
village.
might have been Russia. It was, but
Well,
I,
it was all.
What's it called?
They all kind of went in and out of each other over time.
I don't know how to spell it, so I can't Google. it.
My grandfather came from a part of Russia that's now Poland, So
Here.
Bialystok.
There you go, Dan. Oh,
Bialystok.
sure.
Yeah.
Here, Dan.
Kremenchuk.
So-
yeah, I'm all right. See,
I
I'm
mean,
not saying
look,
city in Ukraine, Kremenchuk.
Okay, Periel is right about a very deep issue, which is that ego or sentiment and emotions have a huge effect on international
Absolutely.
relations. China is very concerned about looking as important, and Japan and Korea still haven't
But this-
forgiven each other,
yeah,
and
but
the
this
Turks
is-
and the Armenians. This is all emotional stuff.
This
right?
is particularly true when you basically have one man ruling a country. Putin, this is his decision. I mean, he has a Security Council, but there's not even like a Politburo like in the old days. Like Khrushchev, the Politburo threw him out. There's nobody right now who could legally throw out Putin. It would be a coup. When Khrushchev was thrown out, it wasn't a coup. It was the Politburo, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, decided they had enough of his harebrained schemes, and they threw him out.
So it's 100% Putin's decision.
It's
He can
Putin.
do whatever he wants.
Pretty much.
I'm also reading this book, Catch 67, now that I recommended to you, where he makes the interesting point. I can't believe I never thought of it this way, that the things that Israel rationally needs for its security are the very things that the Palestinians can't give them because it's humiliating. Can't have an army, can't have this, and this is an emotional thing.
But
It's
see,
humiliating.
somebody must be able to find a way. I mean, I'll give you an example. This is a parallel in part, but then I'll say the reasons why it's not so much a parallel. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev sends missiles to Cuba secretly. Now, the reason for that is because he knew that we knew that he didn't have any long-range missiles. We'd been fooled by the missile gap for many years. Then we had reconnaissance satellites flying over the Soviet Union and said, oh, shit, they don't have anything. And so he feared an American first strike against the Soviet Union. He knew that we knew that he had nothing to retaliate with, so he put medium-range missiles in Cuba as a kind of an in the meantime thing until he built up his long-range missile force. We spot them because we have satellites and spy planes. We saw them. And
Before satellites, right?
we had satellites, but these were spotted by U-2 planes.
YouTube?
U-2.
U-2.
U-2. And the YouTube, anyway. So then, by the fourth day of the crisis, and Kennedy, by the way, tape recorded their 13 days of meetings with him and all of his advisors, which he secretly tape recorded, and which you can now go listen to.
Wow.
If you have any doubts that John F. Kennedy did not personally prevent the world from blowing up. But on about the fourth day, he said, okay, I think Khrushchev needs a way out. What could be a way out? And then he says to himself, nobody cares. Nobody says, well, we have these missiles in Turkey, which are kind of like the missiles in Cuba. Maybe if we took out the missiles from Turkey. Nobody listens to this. Then, next thing you know, Khrushchev, on the last day of the crisis, says, we demand that you take out the missiles from Turkey. And the cover story for many years was that Kennedy rejected that idea and went with an earlier proposal just to promise never to invade Cuba again. But what really happened was that he took the deal. And he only told 6 people around him, one of whom was not Lyndon Johnson, who went into the Vietnam War thinking that Kennedy won the crisis by going in tough, eyeball to eyeball. But then he told the Russians, he goes, look, I'm going to take this deal. We'll have those missiles out of there in 6 months. But nobody's saying anything about this. If you say that this happened, the deal is off. So I can imagine, except for one thing, Biden telling Putin, look, Ukraine is never going to join NATO. Tell me what I have to do to tell you this. But you can't say anything about this ever. Otherwise, they're coming into NATO the next day. Won't happen because you can't keep a secret like this anymore. Kennedy and his cabinet met for 13 days to consider what to do about the missiles in Cuba. Not a word leaked out. Can you imagine something like that today? I mean, it would be out all over the place. In other words, they kept it secret until they could come up with a plan.
Wasn't this one of Putin's beefs that he said that Baker had promised him? Go ahead.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It is true that when James Baker, the first George Bush's Secretary of State.
Rosebud Baker's grandfather, by the way. Okay, another
yes.
Comedy Cellar connection.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Anyway, when he met with Gorbachev, it must have been, or maybe it was
Yeltsin.
I mean, it was Yeltsin. Yeah.
Yeltsin.
He said, "Promise you, NATO will not move." They were talking about what to do about the unification of Germany. Will all of Germany become part of a NATO? I mean, there were Soviet troops in the eastern part of Germany. There were nuclear weapons in West Germany. And he goes, NATO won't move not 1 inch to the east. Well, Bush hears this, George H.W. Bush, and says, that's not our policy. That's not our policy at all. Baker had to walk it back. It was never official U.S. policy. However, it is true that under Bush and Clinton, there was an expressed view that we will not do anything that makes you, Mr. Yeltsin, feel
humiliated.
insecure.
Or
But they did. In fact, Clinton initially had an excellent policy. He came up with something called the Partnership for Peace. And the idea was, okay, all you countries in Eastern Europe, you're not going to become a member of NATO right away. You're going to join this Partnership for Peace. And Russia can join too, by the way. And you kind of, we kind of guide you through, if you want to be guided, the adoption of these Western institutions, capitalism and democracy. And there are step by step. And then the last step, if the rest of us say so, you can come join NATO. And Clinton outlined this to Yeltsin. He goes, that's a brilliant idea, which it was. But then what happened? Countries like the Czech Republic and Poland, led by Václav Havel and Lech Walesa, when Havel was just a philosopher, he said, I envision a united Europe, from Vancouver to Vladivostok, one without any lines. When he became president, he goes, I'm feeling insecure out here in no man's land. I want to join NATO.
the real world.
Since when is Vancouver in Europe?
Well, it was from the United States, too. From the west coast of the United States to all of Europe, including Russia, it would all be one part of. But then he gets in office and he goes, I feel kind of lonely out here. Somebody wants to find a small country as a country that could disappear overnight.
And
It's
we did expand with Lithuania.
Well, that was
and,
later.
What are the countries right on the Russian
Well,
border?
all the Baltics, yeah.
Estonia. They're in NATO, right?
And that was when Yeltsin said, oh, please don't do that. And that's when Clinton said, I'll let you into the G7.
But and there's also, I heard that Putin claims that he had offered to join NATO.
Well, they did initially.
But did they mean it, or was he looking just to eliminate NATO by by bringing the Trojan
What kind of
horse?
NATO would be? Oh, there is something called, and it hasn't met lately. I forget what it's called. It's the something NATO Council, which is a council of including the members of NATO and Russia to talk about security interests. I mean, I think that should become a much more live enterprise. It was for a little while. I mean, serious issues.
He's like a real cowboy, Putin, huh?
And by the way, there are still a lot of issues where the U.S. and Russia have converging interests. For example,
I was just going to ask you that question. Do we actually have any natural adversarial interests with them?
keeping nukes out of the hands of Iran.
You would think we have a lot of common interests. I don't see why
Yes.
we'd even be fighting with Russia under. Like, what's our beef with Russia?
Our beef with Russia.
You
Well,
think
I
we'd
mean,
unite against China?
well, I mean, they've done certain things like interfering with our election and screwing around with this, that, and the other thing. But yeah, look, I think this is a serious problem with both Trump and Biden. I think it is a serious mistake to make enemies of both Russia and China. It's a mixed up anarchic world now. There aren't any more power blocks. Alliances are alliances of convenience. There are lots of countries where we're aligned with them on certain issues, not on other issues. If we want to have influence in the world and you want to play countries off one another, you can't be enemies with both Russia and China. I heard somebody say the other day, well, Jesus, Kissinger has lived a long time, but it's good that he had his worst dream come true, seeing the heads of Russia and China sitting down together. His whole point of going to China was to do an alliance with China against Russia.
We're going to have to wrap it up. But what do you think Kissinger would advise on this subject?
No idea.
No idea.
Also, he's in the pocket of the Chinese. And
Is Kissinger at the tender age of 98
98,
still compos mentis?
people still talk to him. They bring him in and say, "What do you think about this?" I think about it.
Has he been like publicly? Has he publicly said anything
On this, no.
No, just in recent
no,
on
he-
anything.
He's co-written op-eds with various people.
Well, but Betty White was tweeting up, so that doesn't mean it. I need to see him in front of a camera.
When
I've never seen that.
When
for a
they
while.
took Crimea, he wrote a column, I remember, saying something in some way that Ukraine should stay not in NATO as a transition state between
Yeah.
the East and the West.
Well, there are lots of models for this. I mean, Finland is a model, Austria is a model, but now they're all ginned up and they don't. No, we want to be in NATO because that way.
And the thing about Crimea that I remember is that it's not even the same narrative as Ukraine, because Crimea was actually always Russian.
Well, here's the Crimea.
Always was Russian.
Crimea. Look, in 1954, on the 300th, I think it was 300th anniversary of the declaration of the Sovereign Republic of Ukraine, which Khrushchev gave Ukraine Crimea. Now, it didn't mean anything because they were both parts of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was the relevant entity. Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, it was all crap. It didn't mean anything. So it was totally unserious. And you might notice that Russia took back Crimea without a shot being fired, without any resistance. They're mainly Russians in Crimea.
Well, I was always very, you weren't supposed to say it out loud. It was one of those things where you're just not supposed to say, but I was always very thrown off by that historical fact. Like, this has always been Russian. Why are we fucking around in Russia's backyard in territory that was always Russian?
We were never fucking around in Crimea. But then, see, even then Putin went too far. He chopped off, a couple provinces of eastern Ukraine.
All right,
Well, but then,
I'm kidding.
But then what's going on? By the way, a lot of people there are also, they would like to be part of Russia. Some of them, I mean, they vote in Russian elections.
Yeah.
But what he's done, even in many parts of eastern Ukraine, he has aroused this long, latent Ukrainian nationalism. I think this is, he's as I say, I think he's looking for a way out, and I hope we can find one.
And is it true that the cliche dynamic of a strongman dictator looking for a conflict in order to shore up his support at
No.
home
Well-
is part of this or not?
Well, I think it's part of it. I mean, he is having problems at home. The economy is really going down. He's a lot of protests.
And certainly this,
He's
this
mainly
makes him
able
more
to
popular.
contain them, and he whips. He controls most of the media. He's convinced a lot of Russians that this is all NATO and U.S. and Ukrainian aggression. But it's one thing to put 100,000 troops and tanks on the border. It's another to send them across the border, and then thousands of body bags start coming back. Things can change awfully fast.
Now, Fred wrote a great book about it's called The Bomb. Is that what it's called?
The bomb.
Bomb. Just laying out the whole history of nuclear weapons and the close calls and how our strategy changed and how many times we almost had nuclear exchanges that we averted. Do you
Also, Tom Lehrer wrote a great song, Who's
Yeah.
Next?
where do you see
About nuclear proliferation.
when we were kids? It used to be the doomsday clock. Like how many?
It's still there, which I think is.
Is it closer, further away?
It's a publicity. I've always kind of detested the doomsday clock.
But just as a
Really?
as an
It's like at 2 minutes to midnight. Are you shitting me? Really? Are we going to really? No, it was 7 minutes.
in comparison to where the
stuff.
world was when the day that the Berlin Wall fell,
Yeah.
is a nuclear
Oh.
exchange, including an accident, more likely now or less?
Oh yeah. I mean, if that's your comparison. Yeah, more likely now.
More likely now.
But one reason I think is because other countries have their. There's 7 countries that have nuclear weapons.
If
What's
you,
more likely, an accident or an intentional usage?
Miscalculation, maybe poor intelligence. There are lots of incidents where, we saw what looked like ICBMs coming over the horizon or vice versa. And it turned out to be a flock of geese or a computer mistake. And luckily, there was never any political crisis going on at that moment. I mean, imagine if there had been a computer error like that in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
That might have been a different.
Now, what do you think in terms of the human race going extinct is more likely, a nuclear war or a meteor?
Nuclear war.
Well, it depends on the size of the meteor. And it might depend on the size of the nuclear war, too.
Yeah, I don't think a nuclear war would make the human race extinct is the thing.
Well, there are these theories about nuclear winter. And I've seen some calculations which suggest that even 100 hydrogen bombs going off at a particular place could wipe out most life on the planet.
Carl Sagan
through smoke, not just the blast, but the smoke, the fire,
nuclear
the
winter.
radiation.
Ugh.
But even look at our peak, the Russians, Soviet Union, and the United States each had 30,000 nuclear weapons. We now each have about 2,000. Great progress, right? But if it's used,
Isn't there a story about a lone Russian who?
Yeah.
Tell that story before we go.
Well, I mean,
This is an amazing.
actually, this was there was a lone Russian who it was a similar kind of thing. He was on duty with air defense. He sees what looks like 50 ICBMs coming across. The radar shows
What are ICBMs?
intercontinental ballistic missiles coming over the horizon. Now, his order was, if you see anything like this, call upstairs, right? He didn't. He figured, well, this has got to be bullshit. Because, again, nothing was going on. Why would the United States be doing this? Why would they send 50 as opposed to 5,000 or whatever, And so he just decided this has got to be wrong and just ignored it.
And what if he called upstairs?
Well, they would have gone, maybe they would have retaliated as they saw it. There are several incidents like this. I mean, an example of where this didn't happen, when Korean Airline Flight 007 drifted across the border, earlier that night, there had been a spy plane near the border. That came out much later. But the air defense people on duty that night, they had their orders. If something comes over the line, shoot it down. It had a very similar profile to the spy plane, and so they shot it down, killing everybody on board. And for the next 9 months, American and Russian diplomats, officials didn't even talk to each other. And this was around 1983. There were genuine war scares due to misunderstandings of intelligence information. For example, we were playing a very big NATO war game, which involved transitioning from conventional to nuclear use and going through all the procedures that we would go through. Well, the Russians were watching all this, and as a big study conducted by the CIA years later concluded, they really thought that we were about to launch a first strike. And, in the end, the exercise ended and it was over.
So this dovetails to what we said earlier. So just the fact that they could think that we would launch a first strike is just remarkable. It's hard to process that they could think that, because from our point of view, like, of course we'd never launch a first strike.
Listen, I remember when I was getting into this field in the early 80s, there were a lot of scenarios where the sentence would begin, in the event of a Soviet first strike. And you look at it, a Soviet first strike would have involved firing 2,000 warheads against 1,000 missile silos in the U.S., because you need 2 to 1 to make sure it actually works. Now, our missile silos were away from cities, but still the estimates were this would kill, at minimum, 2 million people, at minimum, Americans. And the idea that they're just kind of cavalierly, in the event of a Soviet first strike, as if they would actually do this and expect that we would do nothing. But the whole thing was insane. Listen, if we make through all of this shit and come out of it okay 50 years from now, people will be looking back at this entire era, the nuclear era, as if the leadership of the world had just gone fucking insane.
Yeah. It's impossible for people under 30, I guess, or 40 to really understand how much the nuclear issue was front and center, the most important issue in presidential debates, and Carter and the MX missile and the hiding the missiles in the.
Listen, it still is in a way. there has been no president.
Nobody votes on
Well,
it.
yeah, but hold on. Nobody votes on it, but no president has declared that we will never use nuclear weapons first. Obama came very close. There were 2 debates within the NSC. I talk about it in the book, talking should we declare a no first use policy, and he decided not to, mainly because he was convinced that the Allies would go berserk. And why is this? Because even now, with all of our conventional military might, countries like Japan, South Korea, and now probably increasingly in Europe too, think there's something called the nuclear umbrella, or as it's formally called, extended deterrence, where we say, if you're attacked, we will come to your defense, even if it takes nuclear weapons to do so, and even if the other side hasn't shot off nuclear weapons. And if we ever said, I mean, Obama in this meeting would ask, like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he goes, can you imagine any president really going first? And he goes, no, Mr. President. But you can't say it out loud, because then people say, I can't count on the United States anymore. I'd better build my own nuclear bomb, which Japan and several other countries are perfectly capable of doing.
That, yeah.
And then that leads to arms races of all kinds. And so we kind of, in fact, really, when you get right down to it, if they attacked us, would we fire back? I don't know. What's the point? But that's something that you absolutely cannot talk about, because then that erodes deterrence. Because the only thing deterring them is that you hit us, we'll hit you. If you raise any doubts, we might not hit you, then, and it's not just that means they're going to attack you with nukes the next day, but they might, what are Israeli nuclear weapons for? They don't think, let's say if Iran gets a nuclear bomb, the reason why they're panicked about that, it's not that they think Iran is going to nuke Israel, which has somewhere between 150, 200 nuclear weapons. And no, it's that they will use the nuclear weapons as a cover to engage in conventional aggression, and Israel won't be able to use nuclear weapons because then Iran could fire back. So, I mean, it's very complicated. So on one level, you can actually have a very, graduate level seminars on the intricacies of nuclear strategy, but again, from 30,000 miles up or 50 years in the future, fundamentally, it's all insane.
Let's leave it.
By the way,
that's a great ending.
I could just end,
Very good, Fred.
Well, I just end with a joke that Ronald Reagan told about that he heard in Russia. You ever see that? There's a video with Ronald Reagan telling jokes that the Russian
tell
people.
me which one. I don't know.
Well, the Russian guy goes to get a car, and there's a long waiting list, and he says, "Okay, well, have your car. You can come and pick it up in 10 years." And the Russian guy says, "Well, in the morning or the afternoon?"
No, it's not a bad joke. It's actually true.
And
It used to be.
the car salesman says, "Well, in 10 years, what do you care?" And he says, "Well, the plumber's coming in the afternoon."
That's actually pretty good. I mean, I lived in Russia in post-Soviet times, and that's a pretty good joke.
So I went to Russia on a Soviet Union on a high school trip in 1978 or something, 79, and it was an amazing thing to see. First of all, there was no drinking age, and I got drunk there in high school, and everything was black market. I exchanged dollars.
Oh, you probably had a great time.
You could bring jeans. They always used to say to go to.
Did they ask you for Beatles? Do you have Beatles records?
No, we had Star Wars toys.
Oh,
And
man.
they went crazy for the Star Wars toys.
man.
And we saw a guy on the subway reading a book, and it had a Russian book jacket. And he saw who we were. Nobody looked at it. He showed us he was reading All the President's Men in English.
There was a lot of that. Can I tell one more
Yeah, go
story about Reagan? This is a true story.
Yeah.
So this is how
I don't know, but he was
the
pretty
detente-
important. Gorbachev was his driver.
This is the
If you ever heard
this
that
is how the big détente between Reagan and Gorbachev started. So Reagan had wanted to meet. Reagan finally, when his second term started, he realized that he'd overdone it with the threatening rhetoric. He wanted to dial it back, but the Russians, they kept dying. Then here comes Gorbachev, who seems like he might be a real guy. They meet in Geneva in 1985. And they have some very harsh words about things. And then they decide to go for a walk. And they duck into a cabin where there's a fire blazing, and only with their interpreters. And Reagan says, let me ask you a question. If the United States were invaded by aliens from outer space, would Russia come to our defense? And Gorbachev, keeping a straight face, says, absolutely. And he goes, I think the same thing about you. And then they walk back into the main conference room, laughing like they're old friends. And even George Shultz, who Secretary of State, who hadn't been in on this conversation, is wondering, what the hell happened here? And that's when they started agreeing on all these radical arms control proposals.
Well, we have to end with that. We want to thank our...
I think Reagan was a good man.
Ronald
I think
Reagan.
Reagan gets a bum rap.
Oh yeah, all of those hundreds of thousands of gay men who died of AIDS under.
Yeah, he
his-
could have saved them.
Yeah, he could have.
Okay,
Maybe he could have. I shouldn't have been so glib and flippant about that because clearly they were slow to respond to AIDS. But
I mean, that's putting it very. That's very generous.
He became kind of a nuclear abolitionist in his second term.
Yeah.
It's very. I kind of in my book. I mean, I found out some things about Reagan, at least in his Cold War evolution, that were very interesting. That surprised me.
well, I remember I read a book of his speeches that he had in his handwriting.
He actually did a lot.
And I said, "This is they told me this guy was an idiot. I don't know if any of our current presidents could write speeches like that."
Well, he was never an idiot, but listen. When he met,
But they said he was an idiot.
when he met Gorbachev at Reykjavik, this will amaze you. There are transcripts of their conversation. 7 hours of conversation about nuclear doctrine and nuclear weapons.
And he knew what he was talking about.
I mean, he had some weird ideas about things, but
No, he
basically
didn't
he knew
know
what he
what
was talking
yeah.
about. He'd been well briefed.
It's-
I mean, can you imagine Trump
No,
talking about this for 5 minutes? No.
and unfortunately, I can't imagine Biden in a
No.
different way now.
Biden's well versed in this stuff.
But
Still too
I
bad
saw
about-
Biden on enough Meet the Press interviews to know that he's but certainly Obama and Clinton and George
Absolutely.
H.W. Bush. I don't know. I don't even know about George W. Bush.
I don't know.
He might get a bum rap also, but definitely those other guys I mentioned would know.
Thank you for listening to Live from the Table.
That was great, Fred. Thank you.
Podcast at comedycellar.com for all your comments, questions, and suggestions.
Nicole, wake up.
I'm awake.
Fred Kaplan.
She's
Follow
not-
him on
she's not-
Twitter
she's not a
at
politics
Fred
fan.
Kaplan.
At FM Kaplan.
At FM
Or
Kaplan.
my column in Slate. Or you can go to my website, which is fredkaplan.info, where you can read just about everything I've ever written.
Get the book, The Bomb. It's really good. It is really good, and it's very
It's a great
important.
title.
It's very important.
And the New York Times said it was, quote, surprisingly entertaining.
No, it is.
Explosive, said the New York Times. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you
Wait,
next
Nicole,
time.
rate the show.
Definitely explosive for sure. Really good.
We'll see you next time at Live from the Table. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Fred.
Well, that was fun.
I think
Why do you keep coughing?
I have this winter cough. I'm taking stuff for it, but